you think we can be saved?
I think we need a revolution. We need a revolution in radical ideas for liberty. And then I think we can be saved. But it's going to take a whole lot of hard work. We have a lot of political realities, well, financial realities that we need to really realise, whether it be the fact that pensions are unsustainable, the state pension, public sector liabilities, the government have huge amounts of public spending that they literally simply cannot afford. Whether we take those very difficult pills that are very difficult to swallow and actually realise what is going on, then yeah, we can be saved. But until we realise all of that, if we want to continue in this deluded pathway down socialism, then no.
There's 3 types of interview podcast. There's a smart person and a smart person, which would be like Eric Weinstein with, I don't know, Peter Thiel. And then there's a moron and a smart person, which is kind of Rogan. God, people have shouted at me for saying this, but I mean it like with, I mean it kindly. It's like Rogan and Eric Weinstein.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you got a dumbass saying, explain to me all this stuff. I don't think Rogan is a dumbass, by the way, but... and then there's 2 dumbasses, which is like Logan Paul and KSI or something.
Are we the 2 dumbasses?
No, shut up. No, we are the moron and smart person. So I just want people smarter than me to explain things I don't understand. Because I know in my mind, but I'm never very, very good at articulating myself. So, and I think there's an audience out there who wants to hear from really smart people, but they don't want the smart person. They want, if they see 2 smart people chatting away, they're like, I have no idea what they're talking about. Whereas me, I'm like, explain liberty to me. What does that actually mean? And the smart person explains it. So there's a big audience for it.
It's important to have those conversations, especially because I think that a lot of I think this is a problem with the left, right? A lot of the conversations seem to be around, I am super smart and I'm going to use all of this jargon that nobody else understands. And so people automatically just trust it and believe it, whereas they're not thinking for themselves and questioning it themselves. And it's partly because of the language that they use. So we've got to smash all of that and really get down to what it is.
Well, you've come in the colour of the left.
I have. Although not if I'm in America.
No, colour of the right. You were there recently.
Yeah, I got back yesterday.
Was it Pork Fest or something?
I was in...
Freedom Fest.
I was at Freedom Fest in June.
Okay.
That was really fun.
Was Rothbard-reading
Lots
there?
of cool libertarians. Yes, I think he was actually, yeah. It was really, really cool. Lots of really cool libertarians. It was really interesting actually because I met so many people that have literally risked their lives to fight for liberty. And I always find this when I go to international conferences, meeting people that are like, I'm like, oh, great, yeah, we've just had a, tobacco ban introduced. They're like, yeah, great, I've just had my whole family arrested and we've all been put in prison because I shouted something about pro-markets. And it was just like, oh, okay, really puts it into context, the fact that there's a global fight for liberty. There is a global fight for economic freedom and we're not alone in this. The UK is one particular example, and we can talk about how awful it is here. But we are part of a global mission for a freer and more prosperous world. And that's what I really love about going to those Freedom Fest is so amazing for that, because you're literally meeting people from across the world that are all mission aligned, all believe in liberty in various different forms, but that core principle is always there. And they all have different opinions about Trump or whatever it is, but they are all so driven by that one idea, and I think it's so fun, and there's lots of alcohol.
Well, look, I think one of the challenges is explaining ideas of freedom and liberty to people. I think it's easier in the US. I think they have a culture of liberty.
They do.
Because they kicked us out because they wanted their freedom. But we don't really I don't believe we have a culture of freedom here. Now, some older people say, yes, we do, if you refer back to the Magna Carta. It's like, yeah, but we don't have Magna Carta as a grounding document we refer to like they do with the US Constitution. I don't think we have that culture of freedom here. And I think also like really understanding freedom and liberty is actually quite difficult. I mean, I've never voted for a left party. I've only voted 3 or 4 times in the 10 or so I could have. And I've always voted Conservative, but I realised I was still probably a lefty.
I get what you mean. Anti-establishment, right? I mean, that's basically what Farage and Reform are sort of trying to position themselves as. It's the anti-establishment, anti-existing precursor, and that's really what that is. I mean, I'm a libertarian. I think that the government is shocked. I think that the government, in all instances, will often create worse outcomes than the market would. And I think fundamentally, it's about people being allowed to make choices. It's so, I started off as a Corbynite, right?
Yeah,
I was
you said that.
16. I was like, oh yeah, Corbyn sounds great. I mean, free Wi-Fi. I was 16 on TikTok. I was like, wow, free Wi-Fi, it sounds great. And that really is, I think, kind of like a child's perspective on how things work. It's, of course, I want the poor to have great things. And of course, I'm really upset about poverty. Therefore, the government must do something about it. And that's why I was so drawn to that kind of politics. It felt revolutionary. It felt different. And then as soon as I started studying politics and economics, I realized that, human interaction is really what matters. And those preferences are only revealed through the market process. And that's why...
hidden hand.
Yeah, the invisible... Well, it's the invisible
Adam
hand,
Smith.
but also about voluntarism,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the reason why capitalism is moral is because it is a system based on consent, right? It is the voluntary exchange of goods and services. And that's what convinced me. There is no way that the government forcibly taking money from a certain group of people and redistributing it to another group of people can be moral, because that is not consensual. Whereas a voluntary, no one forced me to buy this matcha latte, right? I chose voluntarily to purchase that product, and I've made a mutually beneficial exchange. And that's why I came to the realization that markets are the most moral system.
Yes, love it. Okay. God, there's loads to get into here. Well, look, this is where there is a weird kind of paradox with the left.
Yeah.
In that they demonize money, but they want to tax as much of it as possible to do the things they want to do. Yeah. And it's that kind of lack of understanding of that to fuel the activities they want to do, that you need a successful, thriving economy. And that's one of the things I've really struggled with when I've been trying to talk to people on the left, is trying to get them to understand the economics of their politics. And I can never really get an answer. I think that's why we struggle to get left-wing politicians on the podcast, because they can't justify, like Gary Government, Gary Economics, Gary Government, he's over everything at the moment. And I've noticed people from the left just repeating what he's saying, but they don't want to have the conversation about the truth of the economics of like a wealth tax or something, that it utterly fails.
Well, he made that video recently where he said...
How to convince your friends.
Yeah, how to convince your friends that a wealth tax is a great idea. And it's just, he didn't address any of the concerns about business development, the wealth exodus, millions of people with wealth that are leaving the country. And there's actually something I really
We're better off without them.
Well, this is the thing. So I did BBC Any Questions a couple of weeks ago, and it was in Manchester. And the difference between BBC Any Questions, which is the Radio 4 show, and like Question Time, is that they don't select the audience. So the audience are just the natural people that want to come to a Friday night BBC Radio live show, and you can imagine the kind of people that they are. And we're talking about wealth taxes. And I said, this is one of the worst situations that we could possibly be in. We are already, public spending is already about 44% of GDP. So half the economy is the state, right? We're already at this enormous position. There is no way we're going to be able to tax anymore. And if we introduce a wealth tax, we are going to see wealthy people, investors, job creators, the people that actually drive the economy forward, they're all going to leave. And you know what they all said? They all shouted good. And I was like, what are you talking about? Who is going to pay for your public services? Who is going to pay for anything that you want money spent on? And what I really meant by that is, who is going to pay for the enormous welfare state that a lot of those people in the audience were almost certainly reliant on?
Well, again, it's a lack of understanding of basic economics. And I think it's a poor moral framework. Like greed, like capitalism is bad. Yeah, money is bad. Billionaires are bad. Millionaires are bad. Like the demonization of wealth, the tall poppy syndrome of successful people. I think it's a real problem, but it's how do you communicate? What is the Gary Freedom version of how to convince your friends of freedom and liberty? Basically, that's what we're doing today.
Yeah, it is.
What was the switch for you then? So you said you started getting into economics and kind of political theory. Was there like a moment? Was there something you read? Was there something you're like, oh shit, I get it?
I think it was probably, let me have a think. I think it was when I was in sixth form and I was doing politics A-level, and I remember reading about John Stuart Mill, and I remember thinking about this kind of negative versus positive freedom. And I just remember thinking, maybe this was that light bulb moment for me. This all just makes a lot of sense. I mean, the fact that individuals should be responsible for themselves and should be allowed to decide what they do with their own money and how they decide to, defend themselves and protect themselves and property rights. And all of these ideas kind of just made sense, but I hadn't really realized what that, the consequences of that for my political thought, because as I said, I was very sympathetic to the Corbynite perspective. I went to a state school in London, right? So everybody around me was sort of, generally speaking, either on the left or apolitical. And when I was in my first year at university, I was at LSE, I came across Hannah Arendt, who was a massive anti-authoritarian writer, really, really interesting philosopher. And Hannah Arendt was arguing, about where rights actually come from. Do they come from natural law? Do they come from the state? And that's when I really realized that no matter where we are in, our current situation, the state can always get bigger. And the state has a monopoly over force. Yep. And that's kind of where the morality came from. And also that's kind of where I became a bit more on the anarcho-capitalist route. So I read people like Murray Rothbard, who wrote a fantastic, really short book called Anatomy of the State.
Yeah.
And that was like light bulb moment. And I remember, I think it was like 3 a.m. when I finished reading that book. And I remember like throwing it across the room and I was like, God, this is so ridiculous. Because I remember thinking, the fact that the state can always expand and the state has that monopoly over force, it means that all of your choices can be decided by the state. And that's really where the morality of it comes from. So all the consequences we can talk about, but just thinking about the morality of it. Markets, the system of exchange, is a system based on consent, right? I choose to do something. I have a certain value, whether that be money or it be anything else. Think about the barter economy. And I choose to exchange it with somebody else. That's a completely consensual, voluntary decision that I make. And that is why the free market is moral, because I'm voluntarily choosing to make that choice. It's really about voluntarism. Now, the difference between that and socialism, anytime the government decide to increase their size, to take money from a certain group and redistribute it to another, that has to be done through force. It has to be done with the threat of going to prison. If you don't pay your taxes, you could go to prison, right? If you refuse to comply with the current status quo where you have to, this kind of social contract. I mean, I didn't sign anything, I didn't sign away my right to give away half of my income to the state and have it spent by the state in ways that I don't choose to. Whereas in a market, I can choose exactly how I spend that money that I earn. And that's really where the morality of it comes from. And then, of course, all of the brilliant consequences, poverty alleviation, etc. We can talk about that, but the morality of capitalism comes from this idea that it is completely voluntary.
So you are for anarcho-capitalism?
I certainly used to be.
Okay.
I did shift away from anarcho-capitalism as I sort of became a bit more pragmatic. I do sort of think back to when I was 18, 19 and think, well, I was a bit sounder back then. But the problem with with having no state is that things like property rights aren't protected. And I do think that contract law, for example, should be upheld by some kind of system. And I do think that a state can exist for those particular things. But on everything else, I've remained pretty principled. I mean, I don't think that the state has any need to be involved in basically every aspect of our lives that it's currently involved in.
Yeah, so I've spent a lot of time with a lot of libertarians, anarcho-capitalists, because of the world this podcast was in before episode 1. And I always appreciated the ideas of libertarianism, but whenever we got to the idea of there being no state, I always struggle with that for 2 reasons. The first one is I don't think you can actually have a state of no state, in that if you switch off the state, I think it rebuilds itself. I think you will always have structures, hierarchical structures in society. Yeah, if there was no state tomorrow, we would form a state with my family to protect ourselves, and then maybe with our neighbours, and then we'd have to have governance around that, and eventually we'll vote for people, and we would rebuild something. And it may be weaker than a state that's existed for hundreds of years. But also that idea of defending freedoms. I always refer to the US Constitution, but that is a way to defend freedoms. And if you don't have somebody defending freedoms, the argument I always heard was that, well, we would have a series of private courts that would arbitrate. And I just think that's so open to corruption and coercion in itself. And so I always came back to the kind of minarchist idea of what's the smallest state possible, and directionally can we always try and be smaller? And if not, if we hit a minimum state, great. but directionally that should be our target. And I can't get away from those principles.
Yeah, I am actually inclined to agree with you. I think that basically things like the military, so being able to, physically protect ourselves from external threats, and also, contract law, property rights. If somebody can just invade my house and there'd be absolutely zero consequences for that, even if I did have some kind of private militia that I was paying a subscription to, I think that we need, generally speaking, everybody to have signed up to that. And I do want to say, this doesn't mean that I don't believe in, a concept of like nationhood or pride. I am very, very proud to be British. And I do think that that is a huge part of my identity in so many ways. But I do think that culture does not have to be downstream from the state, and that the fact that the government had this monopoly of force, especially when it comes to things like the economy, it has so many overreaching, damaging economic consequences. And so I get a lot of criticism for my views on things like immigration, and especially from the right, because people say, well, you don't really fit, I don't fit very neatly in the right or the left. I'm certainly not on the left, but I don't fit very neatly on the right.
Hold on, but there's a reason for that, because you are thinking critically and you're coming from a point of principle, not ideology.
Yeah.
That goes back to that factionalism thing I was talking about, that George Washington warned about. People want to put you in a box.
Yeah.
You're in the team red, so you should agree with us on this. You're team blue. But I'm assuming, as a raging libertarian, you're okay with free movement of people.
I am, yeah. I actually was writing an article about this recently, where I basically think that, so the current situation is not ideal. We've basically had huge amounts of taxpayer-funded benefits being afforded to huge numbers of people that are then being able to come into the country. So the current system is, I view it as like the central planning of the labour market, right? The government we have a huge welfare state. We've got 21% of working age people that are on that are currently economically inactive. And so we have a huge state. And then at the same time, we are subsidizing effectively a lot of those people to come into the country. Now, on principle, and I still do believe this, I don't believe the government should be allowed to decide who a business can hire, for example, right? In the same way, I don't believe the government should be allowed to decide what we eat, drink, smoke, whatever it is we choose to do with our own lives, how we spend our money. I also don't believe that the government should be allowed to decide who a particular business would like to hire, who a particular person would like to associate with, no matter where they come from in the world. But the current system is literally the quite opposite. I mean, it literally is the government increasing the size of the state. I mean, we saw, I think it was in The Sun this week, that massages.
Don't read The Sun.
I know, The Sun is terrible.
Don't read The Sun.
But they reported that migrants in hotels are receiving things like massages and free transport, and all of these things do account for the fact that the British public are angry that their taxpayer money is being spent on people that aren't working. And I think that is the case no matter where they come from, whether they're British or if they come from abroad, especially when they come from abroad and they have never paid into the system, right? That's where that anger comes from. But no, on a point of principle, I believe in free labour markets. Free trade is important in every aspect.
The humble bee. A keystone species crucial to the survival of Earth's inhabitants. Here's how things would look if bees vanished. And here's how they'd look if humans vanished. But imagine if instead we became a keystone species by doing things the right way, by taking responsibility for our actions, and becoming the solution. Iron mines, the world's most responsible currency, the right way. Because the future depends on it.
If I walk down the street smoking a cigarette in a crowded street, am I breaking the non-aggression principle?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
Do you think so?
I think potentially, yeah. I see an argument for yes. Now, in a pub that allows people to smoke, it's a free choice to go in that pub.
Well, who owns the street?
Well, currently the state owns the street.
Yeah.
So they can set the rules. But you yourself, if I'm stood there, if you walk into my space smoking a cigarette, are you breaking the non-aggression principle?
Well, you can move away. So I'm not restricted. Your freedom isn't restricted in that respect. So I don't think it is. But I've
already consumed the secondhand smoke.
Yeah, that is true. I don't think it is a violation of the non-aggression principle, but
Okay.
you are absolutely right. I mean, people have said this about noise as well. Like if I don't know, blast music outside of your house, am I violating your property rights? You know, these are the great conversations. I never get to have these kind of conversations.
But this is, this is almost, although interesting, almost worthless. In that,
Yeah.
I think debating the fringes of anarcho-capitalism, libertarianism is pointless because look where we are now.
Yeah, I agree.
There's this great guy that I've interviewed a few times called Eric Voorhees. He's like a guiding light for me in terms of libertarianism. He is a raging anarcho-capitalist, but he always says to me, let's not even worry about those conversations for now. Can we just try and make the state 1% smaller every year? Because directionally things will get better. Let's not debate what a perfect libertarian society will look like because we're not there. We're not even close to there. We can't just get there overnight. Let's just step by step. I did want to ask you something. LSE.
Yes.
How broad is the education at LSE? Because I did economics at A level and it was all Keynesian.
Yeah.
Not once was I introduced to Rothbard, Milton Friedman, Hayek. I hadn't even heard of Austrian economics until I discovered Bitcoin.
Really?
So none of it was taught there. It was Keynesian economics, this is the way.
Yeah.
Is that different at LSE?
So Hayek was, of course, a lecturer at LSE. So I
didn't know that.
Right, so he was a lecturer at LSE. It's actually how the IEA, the Institute of Economic Affairs, was founded.
Okay.
The founder, Anthony Fisher, went to visit Hayek at LSE and said, I read your books and I think you're amazing. And then Hayek told him to go and try and win the battle of ideas rather than getting into politics directly. And that's how the IEA was founded in 1955. My experience at LSE, I mean, I was vice president of the LSE Hayek Society. I became very involved with like the libertarian circles at LSE, which, as you can imagine, were quite small, but we were trying to expand it. I found the education specifically to be a lot less divided, or a lot less narrow than other universities that I have heard my friends experience. So I think when it comes to things like the student union, they're always going to be relatively hostile towards anybody that isn't a genuine socialist. I had...
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Like the student union at LSE, even so. I mean, I had people come up to me and say, I really hate you. Purely because of my perspectives. I lost friends over it. But, when it comes from that perspective, it was, the student social life was always like that. But that's how students have always been. Academically, though, I actually had a very, very positive experience at LSE. I didn't get marked down for arguing something from a free market perspective. Milton Friedman was on my required reading list for one of my modules in my third year.
Okay.
So it was, some of my lecturers were a little bit more open towards those perspectives. I also think at LSE, there was a big divide between the different departments. So economics, most of the student body even, and the lecturers were relatively understanding, if not relatively sympathetic towards free market perspectives. Whereas all of the humanities, the politics, history students, and indeed their lecturers were a little bit more towards the left, except for, I would say, some of the history, the history lecturers from the 20th century, not from the 20th century, but they were teaching the 20th century history. A lot of them understood the ills and the evils of communism. And so they were very clear about that. So it was a huge mix. When I compare my experience to a lot of what my friends had, it was very, very different. I mean, a lot of them had to basically argue for a different perspective, one that they didn't believe in academically, because they were worried about getting marked down in their university exams.
Bullshit.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I actually, when I used to make TikTok videos when I was a student, and one of the videos that I made that went viral was me pretending to be a leftist in my essay so I don't get marked down.
Can we see it? Can we see it? Find it, Con.
We'll find it.
We'll find it.
And it's really interesting because a lot of those students had to completely hide what their ideas were.
But that's terrible. That's utterly terrible. That's awful.
Well, when I was in my first year, I remember, sort of everybody's meeting each other, becoming friends. And of course, we were LSE students. We go on to the current economic and political situation of the world. And everybody was like, oh, no, yeah, I'm really left-wing. I'm really left-wing. I'm really left-wing. And then I've weirdly never had a problem with social shaming. It's an odd thing. So we found it.
For those listening, me pretending to be a leftist in my... do I need my headphones on, Con? Don't think so.
It's just music.
Do you actually speak it?
I'm putting on my best show.
putting on my best shirt.
Oh, okay.
Oh, God.
So were there factions at LSE then?
I think politically there was definitely, I mean, look, there were different societies, right? So we had like the Labour Society and the Conservative Society and the Hayek Society, which I was vice president of and tried to grow a lot more. But actually I think maybe a defining moment for me personally was when I was in the Conservative Society and I ran for president because I thought, they're a lot bigger, I'll have a lot more influence talking about liberty in this society than I would at the Hayek Society, which was a lot smaller. And maybe I could bring a lot of those guys in. And I was basically the only woman. A lot of the men were asking me questions like, do you think your gender would affect your role as president? How many people have you had sex with? These were the questions I was being asked by the Conservative Society, young Tories. Oh, because they're all mental. But then at the Hayek Society, I felt a lot more at home, even though we were a lot smaller. So I think that's sort of where I realised I don't necessarily really care about popularity. I care about being right. Yeah. And even if it's just me and like two other people that are talking about Austrian economics, I'm fine with that. And I'd rather that than a room full of people that didn't like me.
But in that scenario, are you always kind of dumbfounded that there are so many socialists and so few Hayekians?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's difficult because, there was polling that came out from the Fraser Institute. I think it was commissioned by them, but it was done by a company called Lega. And they found that in the UK, 53% of 18 to 34-year-olds believe that socialism is the ideal economic system. And so young people are absolutely, at least all the polling suggests, if you're taking the bottom proportion of people in that age group, are incredibly left-wing. And of course, there are a diminishing number of those particular people in comparison to the demographics as a whole. But it is really, really concerning. And I think part of it is the feeling that I want to be seen as a good person. So this is kind of like where I come from in my own communications and where I try and communicate liberty in that way. I think the left have a monopoly over compassion. Right? The idea, we found it, fantastic.
What's to say? Among younger people aged 18 to 34 in the UK, support for socialism increases to 53%, again higher in the three other countries. The UK has the lowest level of disagreement regarding socialism as the ideal system. It's the highest net level of support for socialism among younger people. It's highly concerning because that's a large voting bloc.
Yeah, it is.
29% of support for communism.
Have you seen the Communist Party in the UK?
No, I haven't. What
Holy shit, find that website. Just, you've got to, these people are, hold on, Communist Party. They've literally got the sickle. God. They exist. The Revolutionary Communist Party.
How are they not a prescribed terrorist organisation? They are literally advocating for policies that have killed more people than Hitler did.
But they're not advocating to kill, right? So they're just advocating for stealing all your money and stealing your business. And without revolutionary theory, there can be no revolutionary moment. But I literally quoted Lenin.
Oh my God, yeah. That's insane.
But God, see if you can find that video of that girl at the student union. I shouldn't be saying this because I'll annoy them, but they're literal retards.
Oh my God, that's awful.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane, the amount that those particular ideas have permeated universities. And I actually think that this is part of it, right? Because the left have this monopoly over compassion. If you care about the poor and the vulnerable, then you must believe that the state has to step in. You must believe in complete redistribution of the economy. You must believe that the wealthy are evil people that are hoarding their wealth. And so to be able to tackle that head on, and this is actually why I think socialist ideas are so popular amongst young people, it's because they want to be good. They want to be seen as good. They want their friends to think that they're good.
Well, at that point, but they want to be seen as good.
Yeah.
That's different to being good, because when I've spent all week, Connor will be pissed off with me, but I spent all week arguing with socialists on Facebook, because when I announced my private security team, obviously all the lefties got annoyed with it. And I've just been arguing with them. But I've also been arguing from a point of principle, principles around freedom, liberty, voluntary. I was like, my private security force is voluntary and it operates within the law. And I actually think I'm being good.
Yeah.
I think the slight difference is I know people are looking at me thinking, oh, fuck, Pete, you're embarrassing. This is annoying. Shut the fuck up. But I think I'm being good.
I think part of it is the feeling that you're being seen to be good is basically virtue signaling,
Yes.
right? I mean, I think you're right. I love what you're doing over in Bedford. I think it's fantastic. And we need more of that, right? You're a private individual that's taken matters into your own hands. You're saying, I love where I live and I want to protect it and I want to ensure that people are safe. I want to ensure that young girls are able to walk home at night and actually feel safe. And so, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to take matters into my own hands because the state has failed. That's exactly what should be happening. And anybody that's upset with you for it, quite frankly, should look at themselves in the mirror and think, actually, what am I doing to ensure that people are safer? The virtue signaling thing is really, really important. I think it's becoming less of a thing than it was like 2 years ago. And I think that this is like the fallout from Trump. Yeah, I think we're winning with a lot of this stuff. But if we take like peak woke, like 2016, 2017, even 2018, even the last few years before, like pre-Trump 2.0, I think that what we had seen is a real understanding that if you are a young person and you don't post hashtag Blackout Tuesday on Instagram, then you must be a racist. If you ask, there was like silence is violence, all of this stuff online. I remember reading this stuff and thinking, God, like, am I a racist because I didn't post this black photo on my Instagram? It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
But that is the cult of communism.
It is. It is the cult of communism. It's interesting that all of these social issues end up trickling into economics. If you believe that gay people should be allowed to get married, if you believe that, individuals should be allowed to decide what they do with their own lives, and if you believe that actually, you want the poor to be able to survive and not starve in a civilized country, then therefore you must also believe in complete redistribution of wealth. You must also believe in communism. I think part of the problem, and this is why I really, really care about spreading the message for liberty and libertarian ideas, is that I do believe that gay people should be allowed to get married. I do believe that individuals should be free to do as they wish with their own lives if they choose to. I would legalise all drugs, I genuinely believe in free labour markets. I believe in all of these things. And I also believe that the only way that all of those people are able to have their preferences genuinely aligned is through capitalism. Capitalism is moral. It has alleviated millions of people from poverty. And fundamentally, it is a system based on consent. So I believe in freedom, but I believe in freedom both in the bedroom and the boardroom.
Right, drugs. That's an interesting one.
Yes.
I'll talk to you about that one. So I used to believe that.
Ooh,
for a long time. And I think prohibition generally doesn't work. But I'm also seeing the impact of drugs in my society. And it's really interesting. When I arrange these civic town meetings, anyone's free to come, air their opinion. Some lady stood up. She was defending drug addicts. She was annoyed because I'd referred to them as crackheads. And maybe she's got her point.
Yeah.
Like, what is it like to be a crackhead and called a crackhead? Do you feel shame and separate from society? And if there is no I can be compassionate whilst enforcing the law locally in the PSP order. So she made a point. And then she said, but drug addiction is an illness. And I disagree. Drug addiction is an illness. I think drug addiction is a series of bad choices.
Yeah.
But it has a term. It's an addiction. We don't need to class it an illness. Let's say what it is. It's an addiction, okay? Because then we have agency, we have accountability, and we can deal with the problem. And from that, what I did think, though, is drug addiction can spread like an illness. It can spread like a virus when you have county lines and drug dealers in the town and preying on vulnerable people. It's very hard to come off drugs. And it's just the one area I'm like, oh, it has such a negative impact on the society around us that I'm just not sure we need to take the final step of legalizing all drugs. That trajectory thing, I don't think weed should be illegal. I don't think MDMA should be illegal. I don't really think cocaine should be. But heroin, crack, fentanyl are super dangerous and they have this super negative impact on society. So I'm like, directionally, I agree with you. I'm just not all the way there yet. I'm sure you have a great defense of it. So on this podcast, you are definitely hearing me talk about Bitcoin a lot. Well, why? We live in a really strange time with governments driving inflation with their reckless spending and endless money printing. There is a way out of this. There is a way to protect your money, and that is by stacking Bitcoin.
I've made loads of shows about Bitcoin. You can go and research this, you can go and read the books, but the truth is, it is the hardest money ever created. If you are interested in protecting your financial future, it's time for you to get on the Bitcoin train. I've been stacking Bitcoin personally and through my businesses since 2017. It's protected me, it's secured my family's future, and it also strengthens all of my businesses. So if you want to start stacking Bitcoin, where do you do it? Well, for me, it's with Gemini. They're a fully licensed, full reserve exchange and custodian, so they give you a secure way for you to buy and own your Bitcoin. There's no risks and no funny business. So if you're serious about stacking Bitcoin the right way, head over to Gemini.com, which is GEMINI.com.
Well, what I'd say is all of this is happening whilst drugs are illegal. All of this is happening. We are seeing addicts being dragged into criminal behaviour, into the black market. People are dying every single day as a result of drug abuse, whilst these drugs are illegal.
Mm-hmm.
So just because the state says that all of these things are illegal and they are banned, that doesn't mean that that's what actually happens in reality, right? And what I would prefer is a system in which those people are being treated as patients and not as criminals. I am against drugs. I think that they are awful for you, and I completely agree. The fact that there are so many people every single day, these crackheads, right? They exist whilst these drugs are illegal. And I think what we're actually seeing in Britain, just like to zoom this out for a second, is an increasing willingness to break the law. Part of it is because we're getting loads of laws that are just completely ludicrous and ridiculous, and people are much more willing to break the law. But as soon as you're willing to cross that line and break the law, God knows what you're willing to do after that. So, I'm really, really concerned by drugs, and I'm really, really concerned that there are increasing numbers of people that are dying as a result of it. Scotland has the worst drug deaths in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely abysmal. And yet at the same time, all of this is happening whilst these drugs are in the illegal market. And this is actually what's going to happen with the tobacco and vapes bill, right? With the generational tobacco ban. As a young person, I'm pretty pissed off by this. The fact that the government are going to be making tobacco illegal for the next generation of people means that the war on drugs is now being extended. There is a new front in the war on drugs.
And it increases danger because you don't know what you're buying.
Exactly. You don't know what you're buying. Whereas in a system in which these, young people are always going to do cocaine, MDMA, all of these drugs, I would so much rather those drugs be legal, there be some clarity and transparency over what is actually in them, than them all be illegal, having young people go to the corners of, criminals and going to criminals in the black market and asking for these drugs. So much more dangerous. And also, I think this is part of the problem. We know that knife crime is incredibly high. I grew up in, a state school in London. I had friends that carried knives into school. I know how bad it is, almost always as a result of something to do with drugs. As soon as you take the power away from criminals, that is how you can end that, right? What the government at the moment are doing, and it's not just this government, it was the last government that introduced the legislation on tobacco. They are handing tobacco, that are currently being provided by a taxed and regulated private sector, and handing it straight to criminals. And that's why I view this all in the same way. Whatever the product is, tobacco is bad for you, right? It's really bad for you. It kills millions of people every single year. It's awful. But as soon as you make it illegal, you don't take it away. What actually happens is you give it to criminals. And
the product gets worse.
The product gets worse. You get
expensive.
rat poison in them. It's awful. And this is why, I completely agree with you on drugs. They're awful. But the way that you solve that problem is not by further restricting these particular laws, by ever expanding the war on drugs. The way you solve that, in my view at least, is allowing those people to be treated as patients that are addicted to these drugs and not as criminals.
Well, this is why I like the Silk Road. I asked you about Ross Ulbricht.
Yes.
I don't know how much you know about the Silk Road, but that was my access into Bitcoin.
Oh, really?
And and I was a casual advertising exec, had a certain thing I used to consume alongside alcohol. And the great thing about the Silk Road, what they did was incredible. They had a review system.
Yeah.
And so if you went on the cocaine category and you, by the way, I don't take drugs now, and you could organize it in terms of reviews. So the dealers were incentivized to not cut their product with shit and get bad reviews because no one would buy for them. But also the trade was done via the post. I would put in my order, 2 days later, I'd get a thing that looked like Amazon that would come in the post, it was there. So, and it was really interesting. The Drug Policy Alliance said the Silk Road removed violence and death from the drugs market.
Wow. It's fantastic. It's a great example. The fact that he was imprisoned was just abysmal. I mean, I was watching a video recently talking about the deal. So Trump loves making deals, right? He basically made a deal with the Libertarian Party and said, I'm going to release Ross if you vote for me. And I mean, obviously it happened. And I think it's so important because it's such a great example. I mean, as you're doing in Bedford, right? The state has failed on something. Let's move away from the state and try and solve these problems ourselves. That's what Ross did. As a young person, instead of going to your local criminal for your cocaine or for your MDMA or whatever drug you are choosing to consume that day, instead of going to a criminal where you are putting your life in danger, you can then use a website like the Silk Road that is so much safer, where you literally have a market, you have reviews, you have competition between providers, and it is so much safer. I mean, I really, really do believe this. If we were to implement something like this, and by the way, I am not encouraging drug use, but what I am saying is that people are already using drugs and they are already receiving all of the horrible harms of that. We can reduce the harm by allowing those people to be treated with dignity and respect. There's also, there is the moral argument. If you're an adult, I think you should be able to do whatever the hell you want to do with your own body. And I don't think there's any right for the government to decide what that is. How many politicians do we know that have taken drugs, that have on record said they've taken drugs? And yet they are the ones implementing these policies. They're all hypocrites, right?
Oh, well, that always happens. We just had that recently with the Labour MP who had to step down as she was advocating for
rent controls and restrictions, the Renters' Rights Bill.
So I didn't actually put it out there, but I started working on a tweet on that saying I could fully support her in her idea of kicking out her tenants and raising her prices because that's what the market said. What I don't support is the idea that she's a hypocrite. So she should be demonized for being a hypocrite, but I think she should be supported as a free market capitalist.
Yeah, well, this is it because it's her incentive. This is such a fantastic example, by the way, of like public choice theory, right? So as a public choice theory is these kind of ideas sort of founded by two guys, James Buchanan and Gordon Tullock, although it had been discussed before, where just because you're in a market or within the public sphere in politics doesn't mean that you completely transform, right? As soon as you get into the public world, the public sphere as a politician, suddenly you really, really care about things. Your preferences have completely changed. Obviously, that's not true. You don't completely transform as you enter the public sphere. So this particular politician, I forgot her name, this member of parliament.
I can't remember her name.
She is a landlord. She rents out her property. And she had to increase rents for whatever reason. This is the housing market that we're currently in. It's abysmal. We need to build more. But in that system, of course, she's going to be incentivized to want to increase rents and potentially kick out a tenant that can't afford it because she is the landlord. That is literally the market. And no matter how good that person is or how much they want to pretend that they are good, their preferences are always going to be aligned. And that doesn't necessarily mean, I think that one big problem, actually, and this is something that I remember noticing when I was younger, especially at university, is landlords are so demonized. Landlords that often basically can barely afford to maintain the property that they are currently owning, and yet they are demonized so much for increasing rents or whatever it is, when nobody really looks at the root of the problem, which is a really, really broken housing market. Mm-hmm. Why is your rent so expensive? Okay, let's think about this. If we were to actually increase the supply of housing, so you have more choice, so we build more if we had more choice, then as a landlord, you have way less of a standing than the tenant who would be able to have so much choice dependent on those properties. Then the landlord will actually have the incentive to improve the quality of the property, make sure there's no asbestos or whatever it is, because it's a competitive market. At the moment, like each landlord, especially in London, I think it is, has like 20, 30, 40 applicants to choose from. There's no incentive for them to improve the property unless they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. But we have to care about incentives. And this is the current problem. I think landlords are some of the most demonized people in society. It's not their fault. It's the government's fault for restricting housing supply.
Well, and also destroying the money so people bought second properties rather than putting their money in the bank and getting an interest.
Money and credit is a whole other...
Right, I want to show you my favourite state fail recently. A vape. They banned disposable vapes. Okay, so what did they do? They made it so you swap this one out, and do you know what happens when I finish this?
You throw it away.
You throw it away. It's the exact same device with just a little bit more engineering.
Yeah.
It's a complete failure of government policy.
Yeah,
But I
well,
loved it.
the vapes ban, the disposable vapes ban, was always a bad idea in the first place. It's actually the only research paper I've ever written for the IEA was on vapes.
Really?
On disposable vapes. Yeah, it was me and my
Did
colleague.
you predict what would happen?
Well, what I said, I actually didn't in this respect. I mean, I did say that obviously these companies are just going to try and bypass these laws. But what I was trying to say is that there are two kind of categories actually for all of these new bans and restrictions, right? So I think it's just, disposable vapes are kind of a great microcosm for so much else that the government attempts to ban. It's either save the children or save the environment. Now, in this instance, it was save the children or save the environment, where we've got save the children, okay. So we're going to ban disposable vapes because we don't like the fact that young people are vaping. Despite the fact that, of course, smoking rates have declined. But okay, fine. We don't like the fact that young people are vaping. But it's already illegal for under 18s to buy disposable vapes. So just because some people that are already banned from buying something manage to get their hands on it, we're going to ban it for everyone. Adults, children, whoever you are, it's going to be illegal. So it's like we're upset that people that are already banned from buying something manage to get their hands on that product. It's such a poor basis for legislation. Clearly the solution there is just actually enforcing the law. And then there's the reality of it, which is youth vaping is entirely overstated. There are double the number of 11 to 17-year-olds that drink alcohol regularly than vape regularly.
Really?
But nobody is saying we should ban alcohol for everyone just because some kids manage to get their hands on a couple of bottles of vodka. Nobody's saying we're going to ban alcohol for everyone, so why are we going to apply that to vapes? I think it's because people don't understand it. Like, people don't understand that vapes are literally more than 95% less harmful than smoking. They are absolutely revolutionary. It's such a brilliant example of technology in the market that has improved people's health. Millions of people have had their lives improved, have had their health improved by switching from smoking to vaping. So the disposable vapes ban, I at least said in that paper, would probably result in some people not quitting smoking, and would probably then result in some of those people losing their lives. These kind of restrictions obviously have unintended consequences. And this is what I try and say when somebody's, well, what's the harm in just banning it? It's awful. We don't like it. We don't like it smells. So I'd rather smell strawberry vape than cigarettes, but whatever. And they don't realise the real unintended consequences of this. When you're making it more difficult for adults to vape, then you are ultimately going to make it more difficult for them to quit smoking. And that has real effects on their health.
All right. I want to talk to you about money.
Yes.
Is state money, is fiat money socialist?
Oh, God.
Can you have a free market unless you have a free market for money?
When I was a student, I read, what was it called? Money, Banking and Credit by Distortions. And I remember getting really into like the fractional reserve banking versus full reserve banking argument. I don't believe in a central bank. I think that I wouldn't go as far as to say that fiat currencies are like fraudulent in its current system. But I do believe in a competitive market in money, in the same way that I believe in a competitive market in every other aspect. Money, what is money? Money is a unit of exchange. It's how we decide value, how we understand value, how we communicate value. And it's also why prices are extraordinarily important. Prices communicate so much information to the consumer that otherwise would never be possible. It's Hayek wrote about spontaneous order, and he wrote about a competitive market in money, but also wrote about the fact that prices are extraordinarily important for communicating that information. He called this like knowledge problem, right? The fact that no central government should be allowed to decide how an economy is run, because how can one central government, one person or one government ever have the information, the full extent of information to understand everything that's going on in the economy? Everybody makes decisions every single day based on various different reasons. Some of them they don't even know themselves. Why did I choose to buy this matcha latte? I don't know. I just felt like it. I don't know what the reasons are, and a central planner could never possibly know what those reasons are. And that's why the communication of that information through prices, through the magic of the price system, is so important. So the caveat to that would also be the current system, where the money supply is decided by the state, where we have, things like quantitative easing and the government, the Bank of England responding to the government's huge debt spiral, right? What's going on at the moment is absurd, and it means that the pound in your pocket is worth less as a result of those systems. So if we take that away and instead have a system in which we're able to have competing currencies, I mean, Bitcoin is one of those examples where, and I won't pretend to know anywhere near as much about Bitcoin than you do. But the kind of principle of it, the freedom, but also the fact that there is a set number of Bitcoin and that cannot change, it's coded into the system that it won't change, is, I think, really, really important, because this is how you combat things like inflation. I mean, what is inflation? People talk about inflation. What is it?
Is it fraud?
It is fraud. It's the fact that there's too much money in the economy chasing too few goods. I think that's probably the best way to explain it. There is an influx of money, there is an expansion in the money supply, and it is not chasing the same amount of goods it otherwise would have. And that's how you get an expansion in the money supply. That's why inflation occurs. That is inflation. And without understanding that, I don't think you can understand why are prices rising, why do they fluctuate, what goes on across the economy as a whole. And it is a huge ill. I mean, it hugely impacts the cost of living. It means that things become more and more expensive as a result. And it is basically the lie that is fiat currencies. So yes, I do believe in getting rid of the central bank and having a competitive market in money. However, it's not the hill I'm going to die on, because as we said, the current state of affairs is so abysmal. If we can at least get 1%, 2% smaller of a smaller state, that will have a huge impact positively. And so people might think I'm mental for saying all of that, what I said about central banks. But I do think that, I mean, that's what you asked the question, that's what I believe. But I also do think that there are so many other issues that probably are more important.
I think you should go a bit more down that Bitcoin rabbit hole. I think you'll like what you'll find. Just in that. So, okay, I've got pound notes in my pocket. I don't need consent to hand those to you. But when we're paying for things digitally, we require consent. There are times where transactions are blocked, reversed. That's coercion to me. Whereas Bitcoin, it literally cannot be stopped.
Yeah.
I can send it to you. You can send it back to me. There's no central authority who can regulate that, stop that. It's complete freedom money. And that's why it empowered the Silk Road. You could not have the Silk Road without Bitcoin, because Bitcoin allowed that free.
It allowed for exchange, right? Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and it's not just Bitcoin, right? There are so many other different cryptocurrencies and assets.
No, they're all shit. They are. We call them shit coins. If it's not Bitcoin, it's a shit coin. Okay. Look, again, it's a free market.
I met somebody that said that they think that, so Bitcoin is the only true, but there's also like fake Bitcoin out there.
I mean, there's BSV, which is a fake Bitcoin. There's Bcash, which is fake Bitcoin. That's Roger Vere's. You probably know of Roger Ver.
I don't know. Maybe I do. Yeah. Name rings a bell. I don't know.
US government's trying to basically kill him at the moment.
Fantastic.
Yeah. He left America and apparently didn't pay his exit taxes. And they're
what a great guy.
Trying to bring him back to America to imprison him. But he created Bcash, which is a fake Bitcoin. There's Bitcoin and there's shitcoins.
Yeah.
And the thing about all the fake ones, they always try to improve Bitcoin. They try to make it faster, cheaper transactions, blah, blah. But basically, it was just a bunch of people printing tokens for themselves, promoted it, selling their tokens, enriching themselves. Cool. Free market for money. The free market for cryptocurrencies has proven again and again and again, Bitcoin is the only true cryptocurrency.
Would you get rid of the central bank?
I mean, I would, but I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't have the articulate, educated response that you would have. I would get rid of the central bank because I think you need a free market for interest rates. I think you need a free market for everything. Like, to the point where I recently read a book by, I think you would love it. It's by a lady called Jane Jacobs. It's called The Death and Life of Great American Cities, and I put it into, because as I was reading, I was like, this is very Hayekian, the spontaneous order of a city, that you get central planners come in and they're like, we're going to build this region here and that region there. And then you get these ghost towns or these soulless housing projects. And she said, a city or a town is built on a spontaneous order, all the millions of decisions and interactions between people. And I was like, that sounds very Hayekian. And I put it into Google LLM. Alongside, I put that book in. I put it alongside The Fatal Conceit, and I said, you compare them to me, and it basically came and said, look, it's essentially the same thing. It's spontaneous order.
Oh,
so I think you'd love that book. And my argument for not having a central bank is this. Actually, it's two reasons. That, because I think we want a free market for interest rates. It's funny, when interest rates went up and everyone got upset, I was like, we should have higher interest rates. Like money. Like if you want to borrow money, it should cost. It should be.
Well, it's the cost of time.
Yeah.
Interest is basically the cost of time.
Cost of time, yeah. The other reason I would get rid of it is because it never is independent from government. It never is independent from government. And a central bank, the borrower of last resort, is it they refer to it? No, lender of last resort just means they get to print money for the government's bullshit. Just get rid of it.
Yeah.
I think you need failures in life. I think a kid needs to fall over and graze his knee. And I think we should get rid of pretty much all employment law, because people should get sacked for being shit and told, look, you're shit.
Yeah.
Don't sue me for saying you're shit. Go and find a job and do better. But it's the same argument, right?
Yeah.
And I think the same with the central banks. I think money should fail, companies should fail, economies should fail, so we learn from it and we become stronger. Otherwise, we just kick the can down the road for every one of those things. With a child, if you wrap them in cotton wool, they're going to learn painful lessons in adult life when they're surrounded by other kids who think, you're a dick. And I think it's the same with economies and companies and people. I'm free market everything. I just don't have an articulate reason like yourself.
I want to talk to you about one of my sponsors, Incogni. And that means we're going to talk about the weird world of spam. And I don't just mean those spam emails that you get day after day from companies you never heard of and companies you've never signed up to. I'm also talking about those spam phone calls you get from those people who seem to know a little bit too much about you, trying to get your bank details. It's all a bit creepy, right? Now, this all comes from the world of data brokerage. There are companies out there collecting your data, building profiles, and sending that data to anyone who wants it. Which is why when one of those scammers phones you up, they seem to know everything about you. Now, I've tried myself to get off these lists, try to get off the phone lists, try to get off the email lists. I unsubscribe from every one of these emails that comes in, but this game of whack-a-mole, it just never ends. And so this is where Incogni comes in. They do all the hard work for you. They reach out to these companies and they will get you legally removed from these lists. And I know because the last time they sponsored my show, I signed up and I didn't take the free option that they offered me. Wanted to pay for it. I wanted to see if you get value for money, and they removed me from 79 data broker lists. And so I've stayed on. I've stayed a subscriber, and I have seen a massive decrease in the number of emails and phone calls I've been getting. So it's a great service. I recommend you check it out. If you're sick of this like I was, please head over to incogni.com/Peter and sign up. If you use the code Peter, you will get a lovely 60% discount. So that's incogni.com/Peter.
Well, you're very kind. I completely agree with that because it's a principle of individuals having that choice, right? When it comes to currency, we don't have a choice. We don't have a choice about money. We don't have a choice. Well, I suppose we do when it comes to things like Bitcoin. We're able to move outside of that. But it's incredibly difficult when the only legal tender is the British pound. And part of that is because the money supply is entirely decided by the Bank of England, by a central authority. In the same way, I love what you said about the labour market, and I think it's really, really important because we're in a situation where, the UK used to have a relatively free labour market and we used to be able to, hire and fire people relatively easier. It meant that we had a dynamic labour market. People were moving between jobs and upskilling and learning about different things. It was very normal for somebody to have multiple different jobs in different industries in their lives. And yet the whole swathe of regulations and red tape have made that so much more difficult. And as soon as you make it more difficult to let somebody go, you're making it more difficult to hire people, right? As a business, if you're like, I really want to take a chance on this person, but if they don't work out, I'm not going to be able to get rid of them. And that's a cost on my business. I have to, my profit margins are like this and I have no money to spend. I want to be able to take a chance on this person, but I can't because of the regulations. That person doesn't get an opportunity. And that's really where we have to think about this. These are all unintended consequences. The intention behind these regulations are to protect workers. In reality, they do the complete opposite.
Yeah. Well, they're market distortions.
They are. They're complete market distortions.
So for every business, I obviously have an accountant, right? I reckon I spend at least a day a week collecting invoices and statements and everything they require. I had 2 batches I had to send across this morning. I have to spend £100,000 a year with the accountant on bookkeeping, VAT returns. That's all a distortion because the reason the majority of the time is spent is to enforce government taxation, right? I want an accountant. I want an accountant to do my P&L. I want an accountant to tell me where I'm going, what's going on and what isn't. But they're not. The majority of the time is all the accounting requirements for government. Well, employment regulations do the same. Look, I will say this openly and honestly, and I would love Angela Rayner to come and debate this with me because they've made it hard to get rid of people, but not entirely. They've just made a process to get rid of people. I've got rid of people in the past, but fearing regulation, fearing tribunals, I have architected getting rid of them. Constructive dismissal. These people had to go. You only really get rid of people for 2 reasons. They're shit at their job or you can't afford them. That's just it. I know other people might have discriminate and that does happen, but generally speaking, the majority of people, I think, lose their job for being shit or the company can't afford them. But when you're put in a situation where you can't get rid of them because of government regulation, you bring in HR advisors, they architect the process of consultation to get rid of them, and you still get rid of them. But how much money have I wasted on the HR consultant? An entirely, like a massively
and with
growing
all of that
error.
money, you probably could have hired another person. That's
Hired
another
another
person
person,
with a job opportunity.
It's worse than that, though. Sorry, let me just throw into that. It gets even worse than that. So the new regulation Angela Rayner wants to bring is full employment rights from day one. Like well, you'll probably agree with this. I don't think we should be mandated to provide maternity leave.
Yeah.
I don't think we should be mandated to provide bereavement leave. I would as a good employer because I think it's an important thing to do, right? I don't think we should. And I could afford to do it more if I wasn't regulated. I have to, with every single employee, even in businesses like a cafe and a bar, I have to provide holiday, pensions, all this fucking stuff that layers on top that just means it's very hard for us to make money. If you got rid of all this bullshit, I reckon 20% more jobs would be created for my
I
companies.
completely agree. I mean, but this is probably the case across the economy.
Yeah.
If people think about this as, people think that like the employment rights bill and all of these different regulations and red tape will have a positive impact on those particular workers because it's protecting them. It does the complete opposite. These are all the unseen costs of these particular problems. If we don't have a competitive labour market where there are lots of vacancies and where as an individual you can move between those different jobs, this is the consequence. The fact that Rachel Reeves increased employee national insurance contributions means that you're making employing somebody more expensive. And it's like, oh, great, we're not taxing working people, we are just taxing employers. But what are the actual consequences of that, right? This is the difference between the impact of a tax and the incidence of a tax. Rachel Reeves can go on telly and say, look, I'm putting a tax on employers. But who actually pays that? Who really pays those taxes? Okay, as a business, you've now made it more expensive to employ somebody. So you can employ less people because you literally don't have the money to hire more people. So you can employ less people. You're probably going to increase their wages at a slower rate, if at all, because the higher their wages are, the more national insurance you're going to pay, employer national insurance you're going to pay. And in some circumstances, you could even have to fire people because, again, you just can't afford to pay the higher running costs.
Or the business will close.
Or the business will just shut down, right?
Yes.
So what the government have done is they've said, we're going to increase tax on one particular group without, and probably intentionally, without saying that they're going to, without really acknowledging the impact that has across the board. And we've seen it have this impact. You make it more expensive to employ somebody, you're going to have less employment. Obviously, it makes genuine sense, right? But the same thing happens with regulation. As soon as you make it so much more difficult, you're increasing the cost of employment, right? By the risk of employment tribunals or maternity pay, paternity pay, bereavement, holiday, whatever it is. That's increasing the cost of employment. Now, what I would like to see is a worker and an employer have the actual ability to negotiate what those terms are. As you said, you're a good businessman, you've got the money to be able to employ people and actually say, I'm going to give you holiday, I'm going to give you particular positives or benefits that you're going to get in that employment. But if you are at the bottom of the road in society, you've absolutely no experience whatsoever, if you're a young person in particular, you should be allowed to get a job with no holiday pay, no paternity pay, and none of these benefits, because it means you're much more likely to be able to get the job in the first place and have the experience and then be able to move up and negotiate even further what you want. But also, as a young person, you probably don't even need those things. The fact that on my summer job when I was 16, my employer was required to give me paternity pay is insane, right? It's ridiculous. That cost that they had to take into account, otherwise the business could close if they were required to pay it out, that cost probably meant that they didn't hire another 16-year-old. So we have to really think about the unintended consequences of all of these large swathes of regulations and red tape. What might be seen as intentionally good, and many well-intentioned politicians will say, I'm doing this to protect XYZ group, without considering what is actually going on underneath. And what is actually going on underneath is a whole swathe of unintended consequences that often harm the very people they're claiming to protect.
Always. It always does.
Yeah.
You must look at Rachel Reeves and, I don't know, do you laugh or pull your hair out? Because everything she says she's going to do, she gets warned of the consequences. And then she does it, the consequences happen. I look as an employer and I'm like, oh, please don't do this. Or as a taxpayer, please don't do this. These are the consequences. But you, as somebody obviously educated and been to LSE, you must be thinking, what the fuck is going on here?
I actually feel really sorry for her in a
Really?
way. Yeah, because look, I mean, I don't think it's
It's
just
like
Rachel
giving a kid a
Reeves.
gun.
Well, yes, actually, it's sort of one of those situations where I mean, it's so funny when she was crying.
Two-tier.
Two-tier. I was on Politics Live the hour before that question time had happened, and I remember thinking, you know, we really went in on Rachel Reeves, and then we saw on the screen she was crying. We kind of all looked at each other like, what is going on? She looked really, really, really obviously exhausted and sad, and I don't think really realised what the job actually was that has to be done. I mean, the fact that week was the around the welfare rebellion, right? And they were saying, you know, we want to just make £5 billion of cuts to personal independence payments. People are receiving PIP for acne and obesity and various other things that they almost certainly shouldn't be receiving what are effectively disability benefits for, right? There is no reason why you should be receiving PIP for acne. That's ridiculous. It's genuinely absurd, and it's a travesty that the government have allowed this to happen in the first place. So the government said, okay, we're going to make a very, very small cut, drop in the bucket in comparison to the 44% of GDP that the government is spending at the moment. And they weren't even able to do that. And I don't think that was Rachel Reeves' fault. I think that was basically the broader political circumstances. And that's sort of why I really hate politics, because I don't care what party you come from, you're all shit. Like, I don't care what colour tie you are wearing or what particular political party you are saying you're coming from. You're always going to have these bad incentives. And that's why I'm a libertarian. I believe the state should be smaller, and I don't care if you're turquoise, red or blue. I literally don't care. I want the state to be smaller, and I will be happy about any policy that does one step in that direction.
So can a party win your vote if you believe they're going to make the state smaller?
Yes, they can. But this is so interesting because it is sort of different in every aspect, right? I mean, the Labour Party, let's look at the election last year. I mean, the Labour Party was saying, we're going to build more houses, we're going to slash regulation on housing. And housing, I think, is one of the most important issues, not just for me personally and my cohort, but also for my particular age group, but also I think for the economy as a whole. Because building costs are so high, it means that it's more difficult for housing, but it also means it's more difficult for businesses. It means it's more difficult for the rental costs of businesses. It's more difficult to open a business on the high street. So that impacts energy. You know, the fact that we don't have an abundant energy source is incredibly damaging to the UK economy. I was thinking about this the other day. So I just came back from the US. The cost of petrol in the US is about half what it is in the UK.
It's insane.
It's absolutely insane.
Hold on, what state were you in?
I was in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
But the average is about half.
Yeah.
California is still cheaper than the UK. I mean, the average is about, there we go. And that was my tweet. I did.
Here we go.
My eyesight's so bad I can't even see. What is that?
Right. So London, UK is essentially $6.76. US national average is $3.15 to $3.16. Highest is $4.40 to $4.50. Lowest $2.70 to $2.80. Yeah. I mean, everything's.
Yeah.
But everything is more expensive and everything's broken.
It is. But there is a reason for this. This isn't just a random thing that's happened, right? There is a reason for extremely high energy costs in the UK, and there is a reason why it's a lot cheaper in the US.
Is it Ed Miliband?
It's all Ed Miliband. Everything is Ed Miliband's fault. It's basically the cost of net zero. It's the cost of regulations and red tape. It's the cost of banning
it's the cost of government.
It's the cost of government. There you go. It's the cost of government. It's the cost of big government. It's the cost of the government deciding what energy sources are allowed, what energy sources are legal and illegal. And that has an impact on businesses. It has an impact on households. It has an impact on everybody in the economy. Has an impact then on what businesses are able to sort of negotiate and encourage that kind of transaction with another business, which then means you end up with less innovation. It has. I cannot even begin to articulate the impact that one particular policy can have on the wider economy as a whole. I really, really love Britain. I really, really care about this country, and I cannot bear to see Britain in decline. And fundamentally, the problem is a big government. The problem is the big state that increasingly takes away people's choices, increasingly takes away our right to choose what we want in a competitive market. And fundamentally, it is the fact that the government take away consent and take away those individual rights, and that has an impact, as we've discussed, on energy, housing, absolutely everything. I think it's really, really important that we start making that case for liberty.
Have you seen the Coinbase advert?
I have.
Everything was
Has
fine.
it been banned? I saw on Twitter somebody said it was banned, but I don't know if that was
Brian
true.
Armstrong, their CEO, said it was banned. But I think
Do we
by
have
the
evidence of that?
FCA,
Oh.
FSA, if I was interested. I think so. But when you say something's banned, everyone wants to watch it. So there might be being sneaky.
There might be some
I don't know.
marketing around
I
that
don't know.
statement.
But it was brilliant. I thought it was genuinely brilliant because they're laughing at us now. We're that bad. The UK is that shit. Everything's so broken. We're just a laughing stock.
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk, when he came here, I don't know if you saw, when he got back to America, he tweeted out something along the lines of, any American, when you travel to the UK, when you get back to the US, kiss the ground and be grateful you live here. All my friends in America are laughing at us, saying how fucked. I got a text this morning. What does it say? My friend Stefan. Listen, what did he say?
Things are just so bad here.
But this is regular, right? These messages I get all the time. Blah blah. Well done. Blah blah blah. Fighting the good fight, though. To be honest, I'm still kind of bearish on how things are going in the UK. Yeah. So he's
It's
laughing
so
at
bad.
us. Everyone's laughing at us because everything's so fucked.
Yeah,
Like, so
it's
fucked.
awful. I mean, Mississippi's the poorest state in the US, and yet still richer than the UK.
Oh, so that's a new stat I have.
It's fantastic. It's insane. Like, we are. If the UK was to join the US, we'd be the poorest state. It's genuinely insane when we're thinking about this in that context. And it's funny. A lot of the people on the left actually tend to really villainize the US and talk about how awful things are. I don't know how many of them have actually been to the US or know anybody that actually lives in the US, but the average person can afford a really nice house. You know, I mean, the average wage, right? The average manual laborer can afford a nice house to take their kids on holiday. You know, genuinely, it's a growing economy. And my generation have never experienced a growing economy, a genuinely growing, successful economy. And
When you say that, so you mean GDP per capita?
yes, I do mean GDP per capita, crucially. I do mean GDP per capita. That's how I'm measuring wealth. But you can feel it anecdotally. But yes, statistically, yes, that is what I'm talking about. Anytime I go to the US, I'm always really amazed by how people, well, how high salaries are. God, how high salaries are for like regular jobs, what I would consider a regular job, where the average salary in the UK would be about £30,000 a year, and over in the US, you could be earning six figures. But also the cost of housing. The cost of housing, depending on where you are, almost the same.
There's great options all across the US.
Amazing options because they build. They build. They've got lots of land. They build everywhere. But the UK have only built on about 7% of the land. So I don't buy the argument, oh, we're a small island. We don't have enough to build. We can build. We just don't do it. There's so many brownfield sites we could build and that we don't. And it is the government's fault. But why do the left demonize the US so much? This is my question. Because it seems as though everything the US do well, they seem to just dismiss as like, oh, it's neoliberalism, or it's, you know, it's their influence on the world, it's their neocolonialism, or whatever it is, whatever new word they want to think of that doesn't really make any sense to describe the situation. And yet at the same time, they completely dismiss all of the quite positive aspects that the US have to experience. I mean, one example of this is healthcare. I was on the Jeremy Vine show this morning.
I saw.
And we were discussing the NHS very briefly. And one of the things I said was, we need a competitive market in healthcare. You know, we've got the year before the pandemic, we had the second highest avoidable mortality rates in all of Western Europe. Basically, by every available measure, the UK is doing abysmally on healthcare. Lung cancer survival rates, avoidable mortality rates. Look at the UK compared to other countries, we're doing really badly on healthcare. And yet we are told to completely view the NHS as though it's some kind of sacred cow. Now, I do think that's changing. People are starting to realise the NHS...
I say the sacred turd now.
The sacred turd. The NHS is a sacred turd, basically.
And that doesn't mean... Look, I love what the NHS stood for. My mum was a nurse. I love the idea that everybody can be treated and not be turned away. And I love it all. I do. And nurses are probably the people I feel most sorry for in the country. They are victims of socialism because they're not being paid a proper free market rate.
Oh, completely.
That's why so many leave and go in the private sector. We have private healthcare. Reem, our private healthcare is like £300 a month for the whole family. Started at about 150. It's only gone up because, one, I've got older and I had back surgery, but it's £300 a month and the treatment's incredible. Yeah. Obviously subsidised, but it's incredible. I don't understand people who have Netflix, Sky, Amazon Prime, all these things, and they don't have private healthcare. Yeah, it's just I think it's insane. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No. I mean, you're absolutely right, and The real problem I have with the system is people, and the reason why I brought this up is because of the US example. We were discussing the fact that a lot of Brits seem to think that there are only 2 countries in the world, and that the only 2 healthcare systems are the NHS and the United States. And even though the US is actually extremely subsidized, extremely regulated, you cannot call the US a free market in healthcare. But I was very, very shocked to see, I mean, even just anecdotally, people that I know that have moved from the UK to the US, and suddenly they're getting full body MOTs and like, I don't even know when the last time I saw a doctor was. Probably when I was really, really ill, right? Not when all of the in between, the preventative stuff. And it's because there is actually economic incentive to do those things. But forget about the US. There are more than 2 countries in the world. The Netherlands, Germany, Sweden, Denmark. Let's look at those countries that have social health insurance models. These are competitive markets in healthcare. And what that means is, as a patient, you get to choose where you get your healthcare from. If one particular service was really crap, you can go somewhere else. In the NHS, you don't have that choice. The government has chosen for you. Markets work.
Markets work.
There you go. That's it. All done. Markets work.
Markets work. Do you think we can be saved?
I think we need a revolution. We need a revolution in radical ideas for liberty. And then I think we can be saved. But it's going to take a whole lot of hard work. We have a lot of political realities, well, financial realities that we need to really realise, whether it be the fact that pensions are unsustainable, the state pension, public sector liabilities. The government have huge amounts of public spending that they literally simply cannot afford. Whether we take those very difficult pills that are very difficult to swallow and actually realise what is going on, then yeah, we can be saved. But until we realise all of that, if we want to continue in this deluded pathway down socialism, then no.
Malay, not Marx.
Indeed, Malay, not Marx. God.
I stole that off your Twitter earlier.
Oh, did you?
I put it on Facebook.
It is very good.
I don't think anyone would know who Malay is.
Well, they should get to know who Malay is, because it's proof that actually Malay's interesting, because young people supported Malay in their swathes. They experienced the dreads of socialism. A lot of them left the country. Those that stayed fought for liberty. They fought for economic freedom. And what I would like to see is a young, a coalition of young people that have experienced the hands of the state and realised that the reason why things are so bad right now is not because of capitalism or neoliberalism or whatever you want to call it. It's because of the government. Can we all just start to realise and understand that the problems we are facing at the moment are in large part due to the government? Once we start to understand that, we can genuinely begin to sow the seeds for a revolution in radical free market ideas.
It's not bad enough yet. That's the problem.
Do we need an inflection point?
Yeah, well, look, have you been out to Argentina?
I haven't.
It's brilliant. It is brilliant. You can go and have a steak and red wine at 10 in the morning, and it's...
And no one judges you?
No one judges you, and then you go and ride a horse. It's amazing.
Brilliant.
Beautiful country, great people, loved it. Kurt's not here. Me and Kurt went out there and made a film, and it was brilliant. We had such a good time. It was just before Malay got elected.
Oh.
We interviewed his economic advisor, and it was just, the whole experience was incredible. But Argentinians are very much a social culture, a family culture. Mm-hmm. So we went to a couple of dinners where basically they put on these big barbecues, incredible. But I met a lot of people whose children have left. They'd left, gone to Australia, come to the UK, gone to America because they wanted to buy a house, they wanted to get a job, they wanted to earn money. They didn't want to spend 30% of their time trying to figure out how do I turn my pesos into the US dollars. And so there was a brain drain. And that's not good for Argentinian culture because they are family-based. And so but it was so bad. It's not bad enough here. It's bad enough at the moment to just blame the other party. And I think that's what's happening. It's like we haven't had the right form of socialism. And so I think there's a lot of young people who are kind of middle class, their parents are all right, and they just want to blame capitalism. There are other people. My son is a force in this area, and he's becoming, I shouldn't answer for you, but you're becoming a little bit radical, aren't you? A bit radicalized. He works hard.
Oh, very good.
He works hard, very hard actually.
You're getting there. I don't know how old you are, but I feel...
I've just turned 23.
Yeah, so around the same. I feel this growing edge to pack up and leave.
How many times you said that to me recently?
Quite a few.
Where would you go?
Fuck knows, anywhere else.
Anywhere but here. Yeah, I mean...
Sorry, for context. I mean, people who've listened to the show will heard it. Connor just wants to buy a house. We've talked about it a lot. And he works so hard and he gets paid well, but there are so many hurdles for him to just even do that. But also, would I be right in saying, Connor, you're also like forward looking and thinking, what's the fucking point?
Yeah, there's not really a future here in terms of like, you look long term and you're like, do I see this getting better? It's like you said, it's not a problem of people and size or blue and red. It's politics, and I don't really see that changing in the near future. So if that's not going to change, then I've got to make a change.
It's culture as well in this country. We kind of need a cultural revolution, one embedded in freedom, life, liberty, property rights, and we don't have that. I think a lot of people, if you go on the street and ask people what property rights are, they wouldn't even know.
This is actually, you made this point right at the beginning.
Yeah.
This point that actually in the US, because I mean the US, the United States of America as a country, as a concept, was basically born out of an idea, and it was an idea for a system that had all of these ideas encompassed in life, liberty, and property. Those are things that are being protected. The role of the state is to protect life, liberty, and property. And all of those ideas are born out of that. So in the US, there is a culture of freedom and liberty and prosperity. They aren't jealous of people that are wealthy. Yes, you've got communists and so, but they are really, really a minority in comparison to the mainstream of politics.
They're in LA and New York.
They're in LA and New York. They're all in California, and they all like smoking weed on the beach, and we don't really care about them anyway. The real people that are actually making change. I mean, the parameter, the Overton window, the space in which things are politically possible, really do all still care about property rights, individual liberty, prosperity. They have a constitution that means that those things are entrenched. Your property cannot be violated because it is an inalienable right that the state have decided to protect. And the state will always protect so long as the constitution exists. We don't have that here.
Do you want to see something brilliant?
Yeah, go on.
Connor, do me a favour, get ChatGPT up. I hope this works out how I did it before. I've got a prompt for you.
I'm very good.
Right. Just put the following prompt in. Can you compare the grievances, i.e. It'll correct it for you anyway, so it's a robot. Grievances, Connor's dyslexic. The grievances of the colonies expressed in the Declaration of Independence.
AI is so brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah. Independent Ian.
It needs to spell.
Can you compare the grievances of the colonies expressed in the Declaration of Independence with the state of the UK right now? I mean, I should get my original prompt. Okay. All right, side by side, look. Taxation without representation, modern UK situation. The UK has universal suffrage, regular elections, parliament is composed of elected MPs, but okay. Hold on, there's a lot to it. God, this probably is ChatGPT 5 has gone to over most of the American colonial grievances have little direct parallel to UK did. Oh, this is frustrating. This is why I hate AI. Because when I was looking it up, it was like talking about taxation without representation, which I think we kind of have now because it's a uniparty, and it was talking about being harassed by government goons, which we have people knocking on doors now. That's really disappointing. I'll dig mine out and send it to you.
It's that thing where it changes to favour the person.
Oh, so it thinks you're a statist.
Yeah, I haven't used it enough.
I'll dig that out and tell you, because I went through these grievances and I was like, yes. And I think when you talk about revolution, I actually think we're at a similar time to the colonies were, where basically I don't think government is working for the people anymore. I don't think we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think we're serfs. We're serfs. I'm not, but I think generally we are. And that's why so many people are pissed off. Like everywhere I go, people are pissed off.
Yeah.
It's very important that you don't lose this, okay? This is your inheritance through Bitcoin. Oh,
Let Bitcoin rip. Don't rip up your Bitcoin. Set up inheritance with Casa.
But it's also what I would like to see, and what hasn't happened, is that people are pissed off at the system, and I want people to be pissed off at the state and really understand that a lot of the problems that we're facing at the moment have a root in the monopoly on the state, the government's huge force. Housing is one of the most important issues. Your son is right to be upset about it because the cost of housing in the 90s was about 2 to 3 times the average salary. Now it's about 12 times the average salary. Why is it so much more expensive? Because the government have created a system in which it's basically impossible to build, so much more expensive to do so. You have to fill in pages and pages and pages of paperwork. So it's extremely expensive, extremely burdensome, extremely costly. And that's if you even get approval from the awful dregs that are the pen pushers and the local government. I mean, you've got the NIMBYs, they're not in my backyarders, that are
We've got them
actively
right now in Bedford.
in Bedford. And have you fought them?
Yeah, I'm fighting them because they're like your private security. You're what are you doing? You're just pushing the problem elsewhere. I'm like, yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm doing because I think of the town as a body.
One political entity. Yeah.
Well, no, I think of it as a body, like a
Yeah.
body. I think of the town centre as its heart. If you destroy the heart, the body will die.
Yeah.
You won't be able to bring it back. So we have to protect the economic and social heart of the town. We have to have that place where people come, trade, do business, hang out with friends. If we kill that, people will just be in the villages and the town centre will be dystopian, it'll be fucked. So I have to protect that. And that just means some of these addicts and some of these shoplifters are going to go into your neighbourhood. They're going to steal from your one stop or they're going to open your car door, but they're not going to be attacking women in the town centre or following people home or generally making the place look a bit shit. I think it should be okay to say a high street full of addicts, people who are black eyes, covered in bruises, who are tweaking because they come after. I think it's okay to say that that's not a good look. And if you want families to take their kids to town, we need that not in the town centre. But the NIMBYs are there. They're going. They're complaining about it going somewhere else. They're just not actually going, well, I don't want it in my area. Which, by the way, I wanted to troll them. This is brilliant. I think this is brilliant, but I haven't sent it yet. I sent this to my son the other day. So they live in this. We've got an area called Castle Road. I call it the Bedford's Islington Elite because it's where the middle class twats live. No. This is the I sent you the post I was going to put on their Facebook. They've got this Facebook group, and there's a bunch of people who hate me there, and they're like, oh, there's no problems, blah, blah, blah. And they say, just leave the homeless people alone. You shouldn't move them on. We need compassion for all these people. And they've got this group on Facebook. So I wrote this. I haven't put it there up yet, but it said, as people have mentioned, moving people on is not an answer, and we should be more compassionate to those who've fallen on hard times. How would Castle Road inhabitants feel if we launched and funded a food kitchen for the homeless there? We could also have a drop-in service for those struggling with addiction help, and help them with access to services. I think it would be a good way to support those in difficult circumstances. Local residents concerned with these people who have fallen on tough times could volunteer too. Because I know what's going to happen. As soon as they hear it, they're trapped. They're like,
oh God,
I'm trapped.
I'm a bad person
I'm
now.
a bad person now because I don't want a crackhead wandering up and down my road where I live and stealing from my local shop. So we have the NIMBYs in Bedford.
Yes, and you've got to fight them. I think it's fantastic that you're doing that. The problem is the government have a monopoly before. So when it comes to housing, there is no other way. If you get refused planning permission, there's nothing you can do about it. Even though it's your property, if you want to build something, if you want to just literally get an extension done to your house, you've got to go through so much paperwork and restrictions. It's such a waste of time, waste of taxpayer money in local government. I don't want to insult local government officials, but my God, like these pen pushers that literally have nothing to do other than tell people what they can and cannot do on their own property. And part of this is why things are so much more difficult across the board. But this is a political problem, right? The Conservatives failed on housing and government because the majority of their voters were older, mostly homeowners, often, most of the time, were probably going to be on the NIMBY side of things. And crucially, the thing with NIMBY, not in my backyard, they all say, I'm pro-housing. I want to build more houses, just not like on my street, not on my road, not in my backyard, not in my area. And that's part of the problem. I saw recently, a lot of politicians on the Conservative side are now all of a sudden saying they're pro-housing. Where were you last year when you were literally up in front of the electorate and you were afraid of losing your seat? You were afraid of losing your powerful job in Parliament. And so you completely did away with all of your principles. Now, the benefit I have as somebody that works at a think tank is I'm not accountable to voters. I can say what I want, what I think. I can say what I believe. And I'm not accountable to voters that are trying to get me unelected from a position. But my God, these politicians have zero backbone whatsoever. And it's very clearly the problem. We need more housing. Housing, the fact that we can't, it has an impact culturally. I want to have kids. I cannot have kids if I don't have a house. I cannot have a house and I cannot afford a house, at least for the next 10 years in the UK. So what does that mean? It means I probably won't be able to afford to have kids in my 30s. There's a saying, if you're 18 and you're not a socialist, you have no heart. And if you're 30 and you're not a conservative, you have no brain. That transition used to happen by 30 because you had owned a house, you probably had a couple of kids on the way, and that isn't happening anymore. So what's happening is 53% of 18 to 34-year-olds are socialists because they're not becoming capitalists. Why are they not becoming capitalists? Because the state is so bloody big, it stops you from ever acquiring capital.
That's so funny. You own a house, you become a capitalist. My friend said to me, my friend MVK is like, the way to become a libertarian is run a business.
Yeah.
As soon as you run a company, you become a libertarian because you just realize all that's happening is hurdle rates and regulations, things coming in from government and taxation that is stopping you just get shit done.
Stops you from ever doing something that's interesting or innovative, right? If you want to take a risk, that risk should be completely on you as an entrepreneur. There's something quite beautiful about that. There are a couple of different thinkers that come to mind. Israel Kirzner, Austrian economist, wrote about the entrepreneur and the fact that, like, through human action and individuals having that sort of discovery process and they're discovering resources that are up until that point undervalued, and they create value through that in their business. That's why it's so important that the needs of a creator, of an entrepreneur, are completely liberated. Because when the government require you to fill in 100 million documents in order for you to make one decision about your business, you are crushing those people. No wonder why it is so much easier to make start a business and potentially fail, but you can start a business so much more easily in countries like the US. In the UK, it's so difficult to even start, so some people don't even bother.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to say. I agree with everything you're saying. Even if I can't articulate it the same way, I agree with everything you're saying. What I don't understand is how we communicate this to young people, how we communicate this to voters, how we communicate this to more people, and it becomes an idea they want to buy. Because it feels like an uphill battle at the moment. It's like all I'm seeing is more socialism, more socialist ideas. It depresses the shit out of me, Reem.
It is extremely depressing. And look, I've just turned 23. I am thinking about...
You are the hope.
Well,
you
I don't
Connor.
know. Me and Connor, we'll sort something out together and we'll decide what's going to happen with the world. I think it's interesting because that transition I just described, the fact that young people aren't becoming capitalists, they aren't acquiring capital because of the way the system works, it means they continuously have zero faith whatsoever in the market, and they have all of having faith in the market basically means having faith in yourself. It means I have faith in the decisions that I make, and I don't want to defer those decisions to a government bureaucrat, right? Well, that's what that means. And I think it's really important. I mean, my day job, is the communication of free market ideas. I work at a think tank. We discuss academic ideas that nobody would ever read. They collect dust on a shelf, and we try and turn that into things that people actually want to read and listen to. That's my entire job. And I think what's really important is through that process, you have to understand that the general public are angry. They are upset. They need these ideas. They're hungry for new ideas, for radical proposals. And yet all of the offers on the table at the moment are basically just more government, more government, more government. Red, blue, turquoise, whatever it is, it's more government, more expansion of the state. I mean, I didn't want to go into party politics, but I'm going to say one more thing. I think one of my disappointments with reform has been that on a lot of their policies, they have said things that are basically big state. I mean, the energy policy, banning battery energy storage systems. You could probably find it. I argued with Richard Tice online, and it made it into Guido because they called it the Twitter bitch fight of the week. Basically, we argued about energy policy, and I said, there is no way a genuinely free market party would ban battery energy storage systems, tax renewable energy, require all of the wires above ground from the grid to be put underground. These are regulations, taxes, and bans.
But it's reactionary politics as well.
They're
trying to do the opposite of Labour.
Yeah, it's them saying we're going to stop net zero. And that's not what net zero is. A legally binding target in the Climate Change Act. Repeal the Climate Change Act and you get rid of net zero. That is what net zero is. Net zero is an arbitrary target and I disagree with it wholeheartedly. But you cannot sit here and say that the solution to that is then going completely statist in the other direction. I'm really, really worried about politics on the right specifically because, I mean, libertarians are basically a complete minority now. And we are being overtaken by a big statist, one nation right. I mean, most of the people you've interviewed for this podcast, I would probably describe in that category, right? It's that.
It's we've got a few conservatives. We've had quite a few, well, pretty much everyone is reform apart from Nigel yet, but that will come. And then what I call reform adjacent, which is like it might be a economist or a lawyer who is pro-reform.
You don't get, but this is.
We've had 2 Labour people.
That's good.
But only backbench.
But that's good. That's good that you're able to talk to those people and have those conversations. It's interesting, actually, since the election last year, I have found that more Labour MPs are willing to discuss and talk about these things. I volunteer with a charity called the Friends of the British Overseas Territories. So this is like outside of economics, something I'm interested in is the overseas territories. I went to the Falkland Islands in February.
Oh. And you didn't go to Argentina?
I know, but there's no flights between Argentina and the Falkland Islands.
No, of course, I understand
when I came
why.
back,
but you could have gone to Brazil, Uruguay, or no?
Chile, and then gone across. Okay. So I flew there from Brize Norton on the RAF flight, which was really, really cool.
Okay.
Like I went on a military RAF flight. That was cool.
How long does that take? That's a long
God,
flight.
we had to stop at Ascension Island in the middle of the Atlantic, and then. So maybe like 18, 20 hours, something like that. I actually can't remember. And no alcohol allowed because it's a military flight.
And what kind of plane is it?
I don't know, but it's a big
Is it it's not like a 777 comfortable seats?
I don't know.
Do you get movies?
No.
Yeah.
It was very...
But you're not sat in the back like a parachute?
No. It's very similar to a commercial flight.
Right, okay.
But it was really cool. And then on my way back, I went via Chile to... Punta Arenas and then Santiago, and then I went on the longest BA flight home from Santiago to London. Yeah,
I'm taking that flight in 2 weeks.
Are you?
Yes.
It's not bad depending on what time are you? Is it morning flight or?
So they've there's only one flight 3 days a week, right?
I didn't know
to Santiago, yeah, and it's a night flight. It's a red eye. It's a red eye boat. No, it's a red eye out.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And then it's a fly at 10 in the morning, land at 10 in the morning back.
You should go to the Falkland Islands.
I don't have time. I'm going, well, could I?
You do one flight down to Punta Arenas, and then there's only one flight a week from Punta Arenas to the Falkland Islands.
We're going for an interview. I'll tell you about it afterwards.
Okay.
It's a good one.
That's very exciting.
Yeah, it's a very good one.
The Falkland Islands is really cool, actually, because we spoke about culture.
Yeah.
The fact that it's 8,000 miles away from the UK and yet they are so quintessentially British is so fascinating to me.
But you get that everywhere. If you go to Northern Ireland, the people who consider themselves British are the most British people there are.
Yeah.
And they're kind of Irish Brits. But
Well, but they're still extremely British.
They have flags everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Falkland Islands is the same. It's so small and yet there is so much of it.
What's to do there?
Drink and eat and talk to people. I was there for 2 weeks. I was there for a week with this charity that I volunteer with, and I was like, I had to pay for my own flights. I was like, I'm not going to pay to go all the way down there and not be there for more than a week. So I decided to go there for 2 weeks and then go via Chile on the way home. And when I was there for that week, I was like, I'm here completely alone. You kind of learn a lot about yourself when you're in a place like that. It's completely remote. And I had a week until the next flight that I could possibly get to escape. So I had to be there alone. And every single day I went into the pub. There were like a couple of different pubs. There's one called Victory. And I went into the pub. They have a local brewery. And they have like different types of beer. So there's one called Iron Lady. It's really quite cool and interesting. And I tried all of the different types. And it was really interesting because every time I would walk in there, I would just go in and like buy somebody a drink and then become their friend. And so I like got to know loads of locals. I went to a primary school teacher's house to meet her kids because we became friends in those 2 weeks I was there. Yeah. And it's so funny because the culture that they have is just extraordinarily British, and it's really important. It's why I think the Chagos Islands issue is so important, because what we have done is we've completely let go of islands that want to be British. Like the Chagosian people that are in the UK want to be British. And when I was in the Falkland Islands, it really kind of connected to me. I was like, no matter where these British overseas territories are in the world, these are islands that have chosen voluntarily to remain British, and we should respect that.
I want to go back to the reform thing.
Yes, sorry.
Connor, what are your views on reform at the moment?
I've lost a lot of faith in and confidence in what they can actually do. They were the hope for a while, right?
Yeah. Why is that? Why have you lost hope?
It just feels like another version of the same shit. Souped up in like fancy dress, but actually when they get in power, I just feel like it's another version of a party we know.
It's just turquoise now.
It's just
Have you met Nigel?
I have.
I quite like Nigel. And actually, there's a side to Nigel when you meet him privately. So I think you have Eminem and Slim Shady. I think you have Nigel and Farage. Farage is in front of the cameras, charismatic, appealing to people. We sit down with him, he's really smart. And I had a good conversation with him once. I was like, you're the guy. You are the guy. You understand free markets. You understand small government. You are kind of, there's something like an element of Thatcher to you. And I really like Zia. I like what Zia, I think Zia speaks very well on the issues in the country. I think the saddest thing is the loss of Rupert and the loss of Ben Habib. I think they had the dream team, right? They could go in and do things. And now I don't see, and the reason I would have voted reform is they would have made government smaller. I do not think they're going to make government smaller. They're just going to make government different.
I agree.
You might get some common sense stuff on immigration and removal of some regulations, but if they continue to expand the money, they are going to continue to pile on the same pressures we have on the country. And I have lost. I'd like to talk to Nigel about it because I'm losing faith.
No, I agree. Every time I've met Nigel personally, he's always been extremely kind, extremely intelligent. I really do think that he is a formidable person. And this isn't to say anything about him as a person or even the individual. I mean, Zia, I think, is really intelligent, really interesting person, really gets it. These are characters, I think, that really understand everything that we've just discussed. They really understand the problems of the state. But the problem with politics is that you are always going to be bent at the will of your voters. And if your voters want certain things, you are going to have to make those compromises. And that's the beauty of being independent. We can say what we believe without having...
I want to challenge that.
Go on.
I want to challenge that. I think Malay has proven that you can have a backbone and do what you think is right and improve a country. You can sell ideas and deliver on the ideas and create proof. I think Bukele's done that to a certain extent in El Salvador.
And Thatcher did that, right?
Thatcher
she
did
sold
that.
a vision that was unpopular, but it was the medicine that the country needed.
Yeah.
I think that the problem is, in Argentina, there was obviously an inflection point, right? Things were getting so bad that there was like a point of no return. I don't want Britain to have to get to that stage, but it feels as though we're sort of going down that path. The problem is those political incentives. Those people don't believe in these ideas in the first place. I mean, the fact that Nigel Farage, God bless his soul, went into those steel communities saying, I'm going to nationalise your industry, despite the fact that every other conversation that I've ever heard him discuss markets or individual liberty, whatever it is, he will always come across as a free marketeer, a free trader, somebody that believes in a competitive market process. And yet there was a political opportunity, and so Reform came in and said, we're going to nationalise steel if we get into government.
I think that's weakness. I think that's vote harvesting.
Okay.
I don't think that's responding to your voters. I think that's vote harvesting. And I think that they've been doing a lot. I think they've been trying to harvest votes
but
from the
it's extremely
Conservatives.
unprincipled.
Yeah, of course. And I don't understand the framework of what he's coming from for what he wants to deliver. I think the country is ready for someone to come and be honest and say, look at our debt. Look at our debt to GDP. Look at our GDP per capita. The reason everything's getting expensive is because of all these myriad of issues. The country has to go through a period of pain. A short period of pain, but what we have to do is all the things you probably say, which is we have to make government smaller, we have to deregulate, we have to drive incentives to invest. We go through that painful period, but we will grow a new prosperous economy. And this means there's going to be tough times for some. I'm voting for that. And it doesn't benefit from me. I benefit from inflation. Inflation's good for me. It's really good for that's just the honest. And all the people in this country who are above a certain threshold of money, inflation's good for them. I would vote for that. I think an honest... Because otherwise what will happen is if Nigel comes in, does exactly the same shit, they borrow out another 150 billion and blah, blah, blah. The country's fucked.
I think what we need is a positive vision
Yes.
for a freer and more prosperous Britain. And the reason why I say that is because I think some of the downfalls of, well, a lot of I think one of the biggest downfalls of libertarians is we tend to be extraordinarily sad and negative, and we tend to talk about all of the bad things. You're right. Things are really, really bad, you know, like the fact that, as you just said, debt to GDP ratio is extraordinarily increasing. The fact that public spending as a proportion of GDP is increasing as a whole. We literally, like, point blank, cannot afford the current size of the state. And we're going to continue down this path. But that doom loop, that kind of negative vision of the future, means that we never really win people over as a result of that. And something that I've been trying to change is, okay, yes, I will talk about how bad things are because we have to be honest and have to tell the truth. But what does a free and prosperous Britain look like? Let's talk about the opportunities for young people. Let's talk about what could happen when abundant energy sources are available. Let's talk about what could happen when it is easier for you to be hired at a certain job and be let go, and have different perspectives on those ideas, have a dynamic and free labour market, one in which you can choose where your money goes. You get to choose. You have the power to choose exactly what your money is being spent on. That is the powerful message that I think that young people need. And that's, I think, effectively how we win those people over. Things are really bad, but let's show them how they can get better.
I'd vote for you, Reem.
God.
No, but no, like a joke, but that sounds like a political rallying cry, and it's very good. And so, yeah, whether it's you have that aspiration, but the idea that we probably
to be clear, I don't have that aspiration.
But a well-spoken, educated, articulate, charismatic libertarian is what this country, I think, needs. And I don't know, like, clearly Keir Starmer is not a libertarian. He's a communist. I think Kemi Badenoch I think she's just a conservative with probably some small state ideas, but not a libertarian. I think Liz Truss was pretty libertarian. I don't think Nigel Farage is a libertarian. He's not libertarian enough to make the tough decisions. I think he wants to win, and he will make sacrifices to win. But I think we need a Malay style charismatic libertarian is going to come in and just tell everyone, just tell the truth. Why not try this? Everything else has failed. And I just don't know where that person comes from. I don't look at the Libertarian Party in the UK and see anything. So we just need it might have to be you, Reem.
I'm 23, so I'm not going to say I'm never, ever, ever going to ever get involved.
How old was Pitt when he became Prime Minister?
I don't know.
Is it Pitt? Was it Robert Pitt? I can't remember his name. James Pitt.
Who was the youngest Prime Minister of
I think
the
it was
UK?
Pitt.
Must have been.
Come on, will you look that up?
The problem
I
with
hope they were 22.
that would be really
You'll
funny.
be compelled. You could be the modern libertarian Thatcher.
I have no desire to get into politics myself.
Rishi Sunak.
Richie Sunak was the youngest.
42.
I got 20 years.
You got 20 years to practice. But I have no desire.
William Pitt.
William Pitt.
Having entered office at the age of 24, but I don't think he was
I've got
Prime
a
Minister.
year.
William Pitt is William Pitt. There you go, William Pitt. But I have no desire. But if there was a party that wanted me that had a chance of winning and was full libertarian, they said, Pete, come and join us. We think you could do a job. I think I'd feel compelled to do it. But I don't want to do it.
No. Well, I think the problem, this is one problem, isn't it? Because anybody with like wealth or ambition, why would they go in the public sector? Like, you can make loads of money in the private sector, care about family. I really want to have kids. Why would I go into the public sector? Why would I sacrifice so much of my earning opportunities in the next 20, 30 years for the public sector? Now, a lot of politicians will say it's for the public good. I think a lot of it is also their own self-interest, right? They think that they're doing good. And yet, as we've discussed, there are so many different issues with a lot of those particular policies. But then it also means that you end up in a situation where anyone with like intelligence and ambition doesn't enter politics for that exact reason. Often they don't vote because they're just not bothered by the current system. It doesn't affect them. They're still making money. And yet now that it is starting to affect them, they're just leaving because they weren't there to make the arguments against the increasing size of the state 20, 30 years ago. I think it's really interesting because I personally don't have any ambition to get into politics because partly because I think that the political process is incredibly abysmal. It means that politicians are incentivized to do the things that look good. And quite frankly, what needs to be done may not feel good in the first few years. But I think we need that positive vision for what a freer and more prosperous Britain could look like. And what does that actually mean? It means that individual people can choose where they get their healthcare from. They can choose where they send their children to school. They can choose how they live their lives on an everyday basis without a government bureaucrat telling them they can't. And that's crucially what is so powerful about the ideas of liberty. And I hope that we can at some point, at least in my lifetime, get there.
Well, I think you're brilliant. Hopefully you do it in the media for a certain period of time. And then we'll see what you do. But I think you're brilliant. And I also think it's just great that that you're out there doing the media. And I think there'll be people who can identify with you because of your age. You know, I think, you know, someone like Connor or his friends. Huh?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. But like, this would be an interesting, we're talking about your friends this morning. This would be an interesting interview just to send to them. Some of them probably haven't even thought of the ideas of freedom and liberty. They know the words exist and what they mean, but not as foundational principles for constructing society and why they should think about it. So I think this is this is great. But like anyone, like even those 35-year-old, 38-year-old socialist idiots, they can learn from this. So look, keep doing it. You're brilliant. We should do this again sometime.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
for coming
having me.
No, thank you. And thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you soon.